Hello guys, welcome back. So this is going to be the video that I never thought I was going to make, but here I am. Why I call the goddess Morrigan Mother. Initially, I wasn't going to bother discussing why I referred to the Morrigan as Mother for a number of reasons, such as one, how an individual chooses to address their deity is a highly personal matter, and ultimately nobody else's business. It's between the Morrigan and I, and anyone thinking they can speak for her in such definite or non-definite terms is likely to be in for a shock. And two, the people criticizing this as an issue for them are not really interested in debate and discussion for the sake of mutual understanding. I don't feel that I owe people with such mindsets an explanation. But as time goes on, I feel the weight of other people being crushed under the wheel of self-proclaimed experts and a nudge from the spirits themselves. So here we go. I want to discuss the idea of what Mother is in abstract terms before we get into specific Morriganic mythology. We are going to have a look at some of the mythology. We're going to be talking about personal gnosis as well, side by side, and the evolution of these two concepts together. So firstly, I was interested in what the etymology, the root of Mother was. And the root of Mother is from the Pi root, the pre-Indo-European root pair, to produce or bring forth. That's what parent means. Now, I wanted to note that some things were really interesting within this abstract of Mother. One thing was the universal similarity of this title. The Mother title is very similar across many languages, with the roots of parent, as I said, just being to bring forth, which we will talk about later. Firstly, an interesting note about ancestry and human DNA. Genetic researcher Professor Brian Sykes announced all European men and women were descended from just 7 females. He had discovered this by tracing the DNA codes passed between mother and daughter over thousands of years, and that he could categorize almost everyone into one of 7 genetically related groups. These women were also referred to as goddesses. Just an interesting little side note there. The interconnectedness of the universe goes beyond that of DNA, however, and amidst those such as myself who believe in animism, who believe that everything has a spirit, everything vibrates, all of those spirits are interconnected in the cosmic web that I call the spiritual ecosystem. And whether or not you believe in a very Nordic fashion that the goddesses were either mortal women, and there is cause to believe that they ascended to godhood, or they were once human, or that the myths have descended from human people, one of these 7 women in particular, or mythologies that grew around these women over time, or it has nothing to do with mortal ancestors whatsoever, but we are still all connected through the spiritual ecosystem. One thing is abundantly clear: we are all connected. The universal language for the title of Mother seems to be a linguistic reminder of this. Mother, by the way, became more popular, and parent became more popular over the alternative, which was elder. Furthermore, the idea to bring the idea of the root to bring forth does not limit motherhood as a title to biologically giving birth. Plenty of mothers exist who haven't biologically given birth. And here I'm going to make a note before I go into the Morriganic energy specifically and talk a little bit more about that. I think there is an undertone to this conversation which I really truly don't like when people say and state in these definite terms that the Morrigan is not a mother because to me, the relationship with Goddess is that shining beacon, that example that we wish to aspire to. It is something personal, enriching, something that doesn't define us entirely, but definitely makes a great impact on us. And what are we saying to other females if we are saying that the Goddess, is Morrigan in particular, is not a mother if she hasn't biologically produced children, which the Morrigan has, and we'll get into in a minute, or if we are putting these strict ideals of what motherhood is on a goddess, ergo, we, as followers of the goddess, as people, as individuals, as human beings, are therefore saying that these things then apply to other women. So, women who biologically cannot have children, or choose not to have biological children, people who adopt, people who come in and become the mother figure to somebody else's children, or like single parents who merge, people who choose not to have biological children or cannot have biological children but step into the role of mother through adoption, people who choose to be a mother not to their own children but in different forms. They bring forth healing for the world, their own kind of medicine, their books, their poetry, their creations. They create, they bring forth something which reaches out and touches millions of lives, so that people are still alive today because of them. People feel reborn because of their work, their words, the way that the far-reaching tendrils of energy push through the spiritual ecosystem. I feel like there is a dishonoring of many women in this need by some to discredit the idea of calling the Morrigan mother. I think that the far-reaching implications, I don't think people care, but the far-reaching implications to me is to shit all over different kinds of mothers and different kinds of women. We'll circle around to that idea in some different ways in a bit. The Morrigan, however, did give birth. There is a story of Mocha cursing the men of Ulster because their king forced her to run a race while she was heavily pregnant. In the story, her husband was a human man, causing the stillbirth of her two twins. This tale has also irrevocably linked Mocha to, as Raviana puts it in her book of the Great Queen, Women in Birthing Strife. And this is a quote directly from her, page 97. Rough the dwellings in which we are, where men strip Mocha's mast, where warriors drive floods of blood into the country yard, where women in childbirth stir up strife. Strife as battle is linked here with the strife and struggle of childbirth, and is associated with both Mocha's harvest of carnage and with a menacing ability of birthing women. It was believed that women in childbirth gained a special status of powerful speech. The triads recorded that the oath of women in birth pangs required no substantiation. She was understood to be in a liminal place, in direct contact with the other world, and thus her word carried additional power. So there is a number of things that I want to draw attention to this information, this quote. Now, me personally, I have struggled for a very long time with the mother archetype. So the work that we are doing here on Patreon is deeply healing for me, at the same time that I hope it's deeply healing and protective to everybody who it reaches. The first thing that bears note here is the Morrigan brought forth twins, but they were stillborn. They died because of the actions of men. That is another one of these categories of women who have birthed children into the world and have lost them in the birthing process, which happens to many women worldwide. So much so that this became, and bearing in mind this is in ancient Celtic times where that would have been even more prevalent because of complications that we can now avoid in birthing. So much so that this birthing pain became synonymous with Mocha, who then cursed the men of Ulster to feel birthing pains whenever they were called to war. Is a mother not a mother because her children are stillborn? I imagine that's a very personal question. Well, I don't imagine, I know. That is to each woman a decision. Does she still take that title for herself or not? Is Mocha no longer a mother because her children were born stillborn? And then we have the life, death, rebirth cycle in womb spaces. The power of the womb as a liminal space, as described in Raviana's chapter quote, whereby the power of the word, the spoken scream, the spoken truth of a woman in birthing pain was considered so liminal, so powerful, it took on an otherworldly context and became synonymous with Mocha, an aspect of the Morrigan. This pain, this birthing pain, became synonymous with the Morrigan. And that is, to me, irremovable from the process of birth, from the process of motherhood in its beginning. And because of the death of those twins, some, therefore, make that title revoked, no longer applicable, because that's their definition, I guess. The idea of this liminal birth space, of womb space, is very much, to me, parallel to that energy of caves that we talked about in the podcast earlier in the month on Patreon. That Morrigan emerges at Samhain, a liminal otherworldly space, from Owengat, which I'm probably butchering. I'm trying to remember the pronunciation. The Cave of Cats, at Samhain. And this cave energy is meant to be where she resides, and she goes back and forth between the other world and the world of men, if you like, through this cave entrance. And there is examples of life and death happening, as we talked about in the podcast, as it transcends between the two spaces. And therefore that cave is a liminal space for the Morrigan, which is very symbolic of that liminal space of birthing, of womb, of that cave entrance. The Morrigan did have other children, however, such as Mech, from the Dihenchas, but he is dismissed as being too monstrous to count him as a child. He had 3 hearts and serpentine qualities and could have brought about Armageddon. I'm going to note that the authors of this mythology are Christian monks. A brood of warriors are also described as being hers in the Finn cycle texts. Kalanach Soroch, I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, apologies. The children of the Morrigan, daughter of Ermnes, with her 26 female warriors and her 26 male warriors, simply called her clan. Note, the etymology for the Old Irish clan comes from offspring or tribe. Therefore, the mother of the tribe would be related to that elder that we mentioned earlier, that the word mother overtook. I want to remind you from earlier cycles, if you've been here with me a little bit longer, the etymology of monster. The pi comes from moni, to make them think of, to remind them. Suffixed form of root men, to think. The problem with monsters, it's really interesting to me, this argument that the son of the Morrigan was too monstrous to count him as her child and therefore apply the title of mother. If you are getting down to the argument of bare bone facts from the mythology, then children exist in the mythology, regardless of what you think of them or how they are described by the mythology. The idea of a child being apocalyptic in nature and bringing about the end of a cycle and therefore being dismissed reminds me of the Nordic pantheon with regards to Loki's children, and it reminds me of the children of Lilith, where very Christocentric ideas of these children were monstrous in some way, so we are discounting them, discrediting the goddess as a mother. There is an undertone of agenda here from the monks who were recording the mythology. We have to remember that the Celtic goddesses were transcribed into bad fairies to frighten people, with the pure agenda to get them to turn to Christianity. They were taking mythology for a purpose and discrediting the womanliness, the approachability and the likability of certain goddesses, particularly goddesses who also stood for power, sovereignty and ferocity. So to take away the balance of energy from them and just make them into terrible creatures is the agenda of the church. Is that not very possible then that the same thing was done for the children? To take away one's children is to discredit one's mother. So she is as far away from the Christo ideal of what a mother should be as possible. And remember that Christo ideal of what a mother should be, because that is how people are defining what a mother should be in terms of trying to discredit, again, the Morrigan from being a mother. Also, the Morrigan governs war, destruction, and fear. Much work venerating these ideals has been created in modern times, detailing the reasons to work with and worship the goddess Morrigan in and of herself, including by people who refuse to call her mother. It seems that this presentation of her son, Mech, is atypical of the tropes of his mother, and yet he is readily dismissed as something to be slain. And even if this was the reason for his birth, was this not a legitimate reason for being? For a goddess to bring forth a being of her own flesh and blood that created chaos, destruction, and death, and the end of a cycle. The Morrigan is known to end the sovereignty of those who are no longer honourable or worthy of ruling, and replacing them. Would the child of her own loins not be a means of replacing the outmoded if he was truly going to create the end of one cycle, a kind of Armageddon. Motherhood does not get to be determined by those who demonize the goddess in the first place. We can note the relative freedoms of Celtic women that we know of, and that Romans noted their ferocity. We can highlight Boudica, whose wrath as a woman and a mother threatened the Roman Empire, but she was not Irish. But we've moved on. We are not Irish Celts. Ancient Celts. So just some feelings there as to the mythology behind the idea of what motherhood means. And I'm going to draw on some more parallels in a moment as this idea of mother as title, but I do want to kind of just hammer home that just because a title of mother doesn't apply to your stereotype of what you think a mother should be, doesn't take away that title from the individual. Especially seeing as the title is applied in a modern sense, flavored through centuries of patriarchal Christo conditioning. This nurturing, soft-spoken, meek little figure of a mother is what motherhood should be according to the church. For me, the title of mother is exactly that. It's a title. And the following ways are some of the different ways that I think of the Morrigan as being a mother. Mother of the land. Mother of her people and her tribe. An actual mother of biological children. The mother of the legend of Cuchulainn. Without her, he would not have risen to his glory, and the story of him may never have been told. Just to expand on that slightly, there are many examples in the mythology where the Morrigan provokes Cuchulainn. She guides his destiny. Her mythos and his mythos are interlinked, and it reminded me of the channeled poetry from the very beginning of the cycle on Patreon, which was Mother of My Story, Mother of My Glory. And that was a hint at this, what was to come with this. So that was very interesting to me, the way that she had already aligned in that almost prophetic speech honoring her, which is wonderful. This prophetic speech birthed into being, and she is so intricately linked with the idea of prophetic speech, prophetic spellcasting, prophetic poetry, a satirist in truth, that she had put the seeds into being in that very first moment of channeling for this. So she can birth into being way more than just physical children, because she is a goddess, which is way more than a physical human. And so the idea of rejecting how a human being speaks to their goddess in private, mind you, that is healing to them, which epitomizes honor to them, because the title of elder, the title of mother, is applied in many cases to older women in tribes who are not the physical biological mother, but it's a term of respect and endearment and honor, and all of those things run through the lifeblood of what it means to work with a Morrigan: to honor, to respect, to venerate. And for me, on a very personal note, having not had a positive relationship, that title is one of, oh gosh, I'm going to cry, that's how much it means to me. It's one of utmost respect, utmost honor, that I know that she is not my biological mother, and I don't even want to take that biological responsibility away from the woman that did birth me, because that would be disrespectful. But at the same time, those seeking to take away the practice of those calling them Morrigan Mother as if she is not one, simply because she does not fit to the Christo ideal of nourishing in the traditional sense, I guess, when I feel that she is nourishing, particularly as mother of the land. She nourishes the land. The way that she does that might seem harsh to us. She might have removed lesser men, lesser kings, by the swift action of a sword. It might have been bloody. It might have been blood into the land, that act of sacrifice that fed the land, as we've talked about already this month. That might seem bloody, gory, violent to us in the short term. But if we take examples from the animal kingdom, rather than the human interpretation of what a mother looks like, animals are far more in touch with their primal selves, and it can be vicious. It can be culling of the weak, of their own children. But I don't feel that human beings would be like, oh, well, they're not a mother anymore because of that. And the argument against that is going to be, oh, well, we're more evolved than that, so goddesses are more evolved than us. But I feel like we're so determined to over-sanitize what something means that we want to take all the primal elements and aspects out of it, and that doesn't work for me. Ultimately, it doesn't matter. I know, I made a whole video and it doesn't matter. Yay. Ultimately, it's very personal, and it's really about what the Morrigan is okay with and says, and where that relationship lies for the individual. So ultimately, that is a story, a coming together of threads as to why I feel that title is applicable. And that's not to say that I feel like everybody should call her that, because that would be ridiculous hubris, the same way that I feel it is hubris to say that no one is allowed to call her by this title. And it's really weird to me that queen is okay but mother is not, when they're one and the same, because a queen is a mother to all of the land, all of the people. It's just a slightly different interpretation of a title. So that's it, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video. It was a very long time in coming. I wasn't 100% sure about it, but here it is. And there it goes. Many blessings, guys, and I'll catch you on the next one.